be coming in, including our chair for the day. Chair Penaloza is just running a little bit late. So we are going to begin. I now call to order the meeting of the Joint Board of Directors. Today is October 16th. It is 9:32. So we will begin with the invocation led by Director Van Bergen and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Director Taylor.
Heavenly Father, we come before you today with our hearts full of gratitude and awe. You are the source of all wisdom, love, and truth. As we gather in your name, we ask for your presence to dwell among us. Let the Spirit guide our thoughts, our words, and actions. May everything we do bring glory to you and reflect your grace. Bless each person present, fill us with peace, unity, and a deeper understanding of your will. Open our minds to receive your word, and our hearts be transformed by it. Strengthen us to walk in faith, serve with compassion, and live as reflections of your love. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our great nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Otto.
Here.
Director Connors.
Here.
Director Grant.
Here.
Alternate Zandbergen.
Here.
Director Payzold.
Present.
Director Stevens.
Here.
Vice Chair Voits.
Here.
Director Beal.
Here.
Director Bilodeau. Director Chafee.
Present.
Director Lim.
Here.
Director Meeks.
Here.
Director Schnell. Chair Penaloza. Chair Kelly.
Here.
Alternate Annis.
Here.
Director Frost.
Here.
Director Go.
Here.
Director Taylor.
Here.
Alternate Teo. Alternate Heddick. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments this morning?
Yes, we received one public comment, Chair.
Okay, then at this time, members of the public may address the boards of directors regarding any items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the boards of directors, but no action may be taken on off-agenda items unless authorized by law. Public comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. And we do have one public speaker. Go ahead and come forward.
My name is Amanda Quintanilla, and the last time I was here was addressing concerns regarding crime on TCA land. However, today I'm here to address and correct a false narrative involving negotiation. That's on, sorry. I'm here to address and correct false narrative involving negotiation between San Clemente and the TCA. San Clemente City Council members allege that negotiations have been stalled by the actions of Councilmember Wu. However, that is not true according to Ryan Chamberlain's TCA CEO statement. The TCA needs to stand up for the truth and not get dragged in false narratives. Furthermore, Councilmember Wu's prior comment, I wanted to read an email from Ryan Chamberlain to myself. Further, Councilmember Wu's prior comments have in no way soured negotiations on this parcel from our perspective. Any communication from our end regarding this was merely TCA doing some fact-finding to see if there was anything we should be aware of. I assure you, this is a non-issue for TCA, and we continue to wait and to see if the city and Talega can work things out on their end prior to taking any further action. All the best, Ryan. So I wanted to be here to set the record straight because it seems that Councilmember Wu is being accused of hurting negotiations, and I also wanted to add that the city attorney, the city council members addressed the matter regarding the problems that arose from that. And even the Orange County District Attorney's Office opined that it was adequately addressed by the city of San Clemente, and that Councilmember Wu would get further training from the Brown Act. But I think that it's important to clear the air, and I just don't want Councilmember Wu to get dragged. And as a person of color, he is the first Asian American that was elected, and as an Hispanic Asian American myself, I hope that someone could set the record straight, and I think it's in your purview, Mr. Chamberlain, to do so. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quintanilla. And that concludes our public comments, and our Chair Penaloza has arrived, so I will pass the gavel to him.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to ask the directors if you have any questions or comments regarding any of the items today, please select Request to Speak from the drop-down menu on the device in front of you. The clerk and I will be able to see your request. Now we will move on to our San Joaquin Hills consent calendar, items 1, 2, and 3. Would any directors like to pull or discuss any item? Seeing none,
Connors, I'll move the consent calendar.
so I have a motion for San Joaquin from Director Connors and a second by Vice Chair Otto. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. Now we will move on to consent calendar for San Joaquin Hills. Do I have a motion and a second?
Chair, I'd like to make that
Oh,
motion.
Foothill Eastern, I'm sorry.
On behalf of Foothill Eastern, I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion by Director or Vice Chair Voits
I'll second.
and a second by Director Taylor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, so that motion, the consent calendar for Foothill Eastern passes unanimously. Now we move on to board business, items 5 through 8. First, we have item 5, the pension funding policy. This item will be presented by Diane Honeywell, Senior Director of Finance. May we please have that report? Good morning.
Good morning, directors. My name is Diana Honeywell. I'm the Senior Director of Finance, and the item before you is a pension funding policy. And this item was presented at the Joint Finance and Investment Committee meeting on September 24th, and the committee unanimously recommended this item for approval. So TCA participates in a defined benefit pension plan through the Orange County Employees Retirement System, commonly referred to as OSERS. TCA's boards of directors adopted a strategic plan goal of developing a policy addressing pension liabilities. The financial objective of the defined benefit pension plan is to fund the long-term cost of benefits provided to plan members and to ensure that resources are available to meet future pension obligations. The key elements to fund pension obligations include employee and employer contributions and take into consideration various actuarial assumptions such as economic and demographic factors, investment rates of return, rates of retirement, and mortality rates. The actuarial assumptions look at plan assets versus plan liabilities. And if plan assets fall short of plan liabilities, there is a funding gap referred to as the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, or UAAL. In 2019, TCA had a $12.8 million unfunded liability, which was paid off. San Joaquin Hills portion was $4 million, and Foothill Eastern's portion was $8.8 million. Paying off the unfunded liability at that time saved the agencies $2.5 million combined. Since 2019, TCA has not incurred an additional unfunded liability. The objective of the pension funding policy is to maintain a funded ratio of up to 100% and no less than 90% of the total actuarial accrued liability. The reason this range was chosen is that historically the funding level fluctuated by 5% one year and then 3 to 4% the other way the next year. So if we'd paid off the unfunded liability when it was 95% funded, the next year's positive movement would have put us in a position of being superfunded. And superfunded means that the plan has accumulated more assets than liabilities, and when the plan is superfunded, the agencies are unable to receive the excess funds back from OSERS. And as I previously mentioned, TCA has not had an unfunded liability since paying it off in 2019, and currently TCA's plan is funded at a level of about 105%. Now I will discuss the process that agencies will undertake each year to determine if there is an unfunded pension liability. Each year, OSERS actuary Siegel prepares an actuarial report for the plan, and in this report, the unfunded liability, if any, is identified. And OSERS Board of Directors generally approves this report in June of each year. As a practice, TCA will review the actuarial report after its approval, and if the funded ratio is below 90%, two factors will be considered: TCA's investment earnings versus OSER's investment earnings, and availability of sufficient cash reserves. If it's determined that OSERS has a higher investment return than TCA, which is usually the case, and TCA has sufficient cash reserves to pay down the unfunded liability without conflicting with other strategic plan initiatives, a recommendation will be made during the annual budget process to pay down the unfunded liability. And I want to add that this initiative reflects the board's commitment to long-term financial stewardship and responsible fiscal governance of the agencies. So with that, the board recommendation for San Joaquin Hills Transportation Corridor Agency is to adopt Resolution S 2025-04, establishing the pension funding policy for the San Joaquin Hills Transportation Corridor Agency. And for Foothill Eastern, it is to adopt Resolution F 2025-05, establishing the pension funding policy for the Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor Agency. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Honeywell. I will open it up to my colleagues if anybody has any comments or questions. No? Seeing none, I will do San Joaquin Hills first, if I could entertain a motion. We have a motion by Director Grant.
Second.
And second by Director Frost. Yes, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Now Foothill Eastern.
Second.
Director Snell, and second by Director Meeks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. That passes unanimously, Madam Clerk. Next, we have item 6, which is the Pacifica Improvements Project Financial Considerations. This item will be presented by Howard Mallon, our Chief Financial Officer. May we please have that report?
Good morning. Howard Mallon, Chief Financial Officer. For this item, a Pacifica Improvement Project Financial Considerations, we're really talking about the remodel project that the board's approved in June. And given this substantial nature of the project, we wanted to look at financially how the boards would handle that project. This item was unanimously approved by the Joint Finance and Investment Committee and recommended for approval by the boards. So by way of background, Foothill Eastern purchased Pacifica and then did some improvements from the time period of 96 through 2000. Total cost of the purchase and improvements was $5.9 million. And in that time frame, they then executed a lease with San Joaquin Hills, a market value lease that is regularly, on an annual basis actually, reevaluated based upon analysis done with real estate consultants, and that is included each year in both boards' budgets for approval. While While that's been the process, and during that time frame all the way through today, Foothill Eastern has paid for the regular recurring maintenance on the building, and then San Joaquin has then paid their lease payments. However, in 2016, the process was changed a little bit when both boards wanted to improve this boardroom. It's not a very large project in the whole scheme of things, but it was really the first project of any substantial nature that had been done since 2000. It was $172,000, and both boards agreed to split the cost of that 50-50. And why San Joaquin did approve that at the time, the understanding is that there was expected to be significant improvements going into the future from that point forward, and they wanted to ensure that their lease payments did not go up substantially as those improvements were done, so they participated by paying half as leasehold improvements. In 2020, that process was continued where there was going to be additional Pacifica improvements. I'm calling that limited here. That was primarily restrooms, carpeting, paint, but the focus was really on the customer service center, and there was going to be improvements there. The $450,000 was approved by both boards to be split equally under that same concept, and that was the design contract. The all-in project was expected to be about $2 to $3 million. However, literally 1 week later is when the COVID pandemic hit, and the project was then, at the time, just put on hold, but ultimately canceled because, as we learned through the pandemic and as we're operating today, we did not need to increase space for customer service within the building because we operate both on-site and remotely for customer service now. So given that, we move into the project itself. That's the $36 million project that the boards approved in June of 2025. The project analysis cost to date of $259,000 was also shared equally under that same concept. But given the size and magnitude of this project, we wanted to look a little bit further what made most sense for both boards. And so in doing so, part of the analysis was to get a formal appraisal of the Pacifica building and land. That was completed in September of this year, and that appraisal shows a value of $12.96 million. So let's talk then about the scenarios we looked at as to how the boards would participate in this project. So scenario one is the concept that San Joaquin has been going forward with over time, and that is trying to maintain a below market rent, because if you do a $36 million project on the building, a market rent would have substantially increased the rent. And so that would be Foothill maintaining ownership, but the remodel costs being shared equally under the concept that San Joaquin had been following for the smaller projects. Utility and maintenance costs would continue to be paid into the future by Foothill Eastern, and San Joaquin's rent would remain unchanged. What I mean by that is when the project would be completed, instead of going to a much higher market rent, it would stay closer to where it is today, but maybe increase 3% a year, according to the real estate analyst. And that rent today is about $670,000. Now, what we did, and the numbers you see there, that is the net present value of a 30-year analysis of all of these costs and who would be paying the various costs that I've discussed. It also considers the residual value that the real estate consultant had done for us in the past. A little bit earlier this year, that was an expectation that the residual value at about 30 years is around $47 million for the building. So as you can see here, there's quite a disparity between the investment net present value for both agencies. And so we wanted to look at other scenarios to see what might make a little bit more sense. So scenario two was a shared ownership concept in Pacifica. That would be where 50% of Pacifica would be sold by Foothill Eastern to San Joaquin Hills at half of the appraised value, so in this case, $6.48 million. The remodel costs would be shared equally, but from that point forward, all other costs, maintenance and other improvement costs, would be shared equally, and San Joaquin would no longer pay rent. So as you can see here, the investment values, net present value to today are closer than in scenario one, but still not quite what you would say on par or 50-50. That being said, when you look at this scenario, after that initial payment by San Joaquin to Foothill for a 50% property interest, every cost into the future would be shared equally. So this is what I would call the closest to equal for the two agencies from that perspective. We did look at one other scenario, and that would be what would happen if it ultimately became market rent, because that is what the current rental agreement is between the two agencies. So in this scenario, Pacifica would maintain ownership. The remodel costs would be paid in full by Foothill, though. And then going forward, everything would remain the same. Foothill would pay for all utilities and maintenance, but San Joaquin's rent would move to a market value rent at completion of the project. And the analyst's analysis shows over a 50% increase in that market rent. Their projection would be, at the time, it would go over $1 million per year, up to $1.4 million potentially in year one after remodel. And then in this scenario, Foothill Eastern would reimburse San Joaquin for the costs that it had paid to date, so a little over $100,000. You can see it's really not much different than scenario 2. It actually turns out to be very close. So what we did before we wanted to make a recommendation is we dug a little bit further into the history of the agencies to understand why Foothill purchased the building and San Joaquin was renting. So looking at that history, again, Foothill purchased the building in '96. At that time, San Joaquin had not begun operations. San Joaquin began operations of their roads later in '96 from the purchase. Foothill had already been in operations for a while on a portion of the corridor. And at that time, if you look at San Joaquin's audited financial statements, they had about $1 million recorded. So they did not have the funds. We did talk to a staffer from that time period. While they did not have any additional context to give, they did understand at the time that the decision was likely made because of for financial reasons. And so even though that was the case, let's talk about what's happened from that point forward. San Joaquin and Foothill have shared staff. They have shared financial systems, back office systems. They have shared customer service center. So there has been a common aspect for over 25 years of both agencies sharing and cooperating with each other. Even more recently, now with SBCTA, transaction and violation processing being done by the agencies, they both participate in that and both pay for the cost of doing so, but they also receive a portion of the revenues of doing so. And while we expect that in the future, if there's future partnerships similar to SBCTA, and even if the agencies were to become the Western Regional Hub, we see that there will be a continued partnership and cooperation. And given that, that has been the path forward for both agencies over those 25 plus years, staff recommendation is scenario 2. And as I said, while no scenario does equally benefit financially both agencies equally, scenario 2 is the closest to that, because once San Joaquin does make a 50% purchase in the building, into the future, all costs will be shared equally. And that scenario is, and none of the scenarios really are significant in the context of both agencies' finances. It doesn't have any significant impact on either of them. And it really does. I think this aligns with the agency's history of cost sharing and revenue sharing, and that expected continuation into the future as well. So key sale terms that we would outline is, as I've said, a 50% ownership sale from Foothill Eastern to San Joaquin for $6.48 million. We have worked through what estimated closing costs would be, and it's relatively minor. There's no need for an escrow in this scenario. So we expect that the cost would be less than $10,000 per agency. We would work with legal to develop a tenant and comment agreement to ensure that they're on the same page on how the building operates. That would also provide for an opportunity for one agency to purchase the other agency's share if one agency were to sunset before the other. And then ultimately, there'd be a lease termination between the agencies. And if the boards were to approve this today, the steps forward would be working with legal to bring those agreements back to the board in the near term for approval. So as such, the recommendation for the San Joaquin Hills Transportation Corridor Agency is to approve that San Joaquin Hills purchase a 50% ownership in the Pacifica property from the Foothill Eastern, and then instruct staff to return to the Board of Directors with the appropriate agreements for approval, and Foothill Eastern's recommendation is the same. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Mallon, for that report. I will open it up to any of my colleagues, directors. Do you guys have any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for San Joaquin Hills.
So moved.
Moved by Director Pezzold and second by Director Stevens. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. Madam Clerk, that motion passes unanimously. Next, Foothill Eastern. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion. Second.
Director Taylor and seconded by Vice Chair Voits. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. That motion also passes unanimously. The next business item is, thank you, Director Mallon. The next business item is item 7, system-wide traffic study. This item will be presented by Tim Byrne, Deputy Chief Executive Officer. May we please have that report?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. Tim Byrne, Deputy Chief Executive Officer. The item before you for consideration is a system-wide traffic study task order approval. This system-wide traffic study is a specific strategic plan activity identified in the strategic plan, and these are performed every 5 to 7 years. The last iteration was completed in 2020. And the reason why we do this study is so that we, A, can understand traffic operations on our system, B, we identify timing of capital improvement projects for our system, and C, to inform staff engagement when we discuss future planning considerations with local, regional, and state partners specific to our facilities. Now, the approach that the study will take will look at updated traffic forecasts from the regional traffic model, develop a detailed traffic simulation model that allows us to evaluate traffic operations on the entire gamut of our toll facility, assess, and then once we have these tools, we will assess interim conditions in the 2030 timeframe and then post-horizon year scenarios as well. Timeline for this, if approved today, we hope to give notice to proceed to a consultant by the end of this month, have draft summary results in the spring of next year, and then a final report during summer of next year. The procurement for this, we have an on-call traffic services bench that includes 4 firms that were pre-qualified, and part of the pre-qualifications was this task was included in the scope that was presented to these firms back in 2020 when these benches were developed. We released the task order request for proposal to all 4 firms on that bench, and we received 3 proposals, evaluated those proposals based on their staffing plan, the work plan, and their cost proposal. And from that, we developed the following rankings, and Jacobs came out as the #1 ranked firm. Jacobs has demonstrated a very strong understanding of the scope of work. They provide the best value for our agencies. They have very strong toll modeling and simulation modeling experience, not only nationally but locally. They've done simulation modeling for the local toll facilities here in Orange County, and they have experience with the regional model that OCTA mains and manages, the Orange County Transportation Analysis Model. And that's the tool that we will be using as part of our study. So with that, the recommendation is for the boards to consider a task order proposal for Jacobs Engineering. The recommendations for both agencies are identical, except for the dollar value. For San Joaquin Hills, it's about $151,000 with a 10% contingency. And then for Foothill, it's about $268,000 for the task order. And the differential between the two is a 36-64 split. I think you've probably heard this before. That is the lane mileage difference between the two agencies. So since we're doing a system-wide study, we figured that was the most reasonable breakdown for the two agencies. So with that, we request you approve these recommendations, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Deputy CEO. Do any directors have questions or comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for San Joaquin Hills.
Connors, I'll move.
Moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Connors. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. Now entertain a motion for Foothill
On
Eastern
behalf of Foothill, move the item.
Moved.
Thank you for the presentation.
by Vice Chair Voits and seconded by Director Lim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. That motion passes unanimously, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Our last business item for today is number 8, Toll Plaza Reuse Request for Information Update. This is an information-only item, and it will be presented by David Spears, Acting Chief Capital Program Officer. May we please have that presentation?
Thank you, Directors and Chair. Yes, David Spears, Deputy Chief of Capital Programs, and this item is a strategic plan activity looking at potential reuses for our toll plazas. We did issue a request for information, and what I'm sharing today is an update on that process. This slide shows you the 5 mainline toll plazas on our system. At each of these 5 locations, there's both a northbound and southbound toll plaza. So hence, we have 10 toll plazas that are potential for consideration for reuse opportunities. A little history. In 2014, our agencies converted to all electronic tolling, and that's what really created this opportunity of underutilized space at toll plazas. In 2016, we developed an initial preliminary toll plaza reuse study. A few ideas came out of that process that were implemented. One was to utilize our toll plaza buildings for one of our contractors who does on-road toll support for us. And we also used some of those facilities for document control storage. None of the other items were advanced at that time. And fast forward to 2022, we had some discussions with the Joint Capital Committee at that time about exploring uses. And the committee suggested at that time that we consider issuing an RFI, a request for information to industry, to see what ideas are out there among industry, rather than just us trying to come up with ideas on our own. We actually issued that request for information in December of 2024. We did a lot of promotion of that locally, thinking that there's a lot of times the best ideas come from your homegrown market. So we marketed it very heavily here locally through chambers and other media, our social media. But we also used 2 bid engines. We used our Planet Bids is how we do most of our procurements. So there was over 1,400 firms that received the RFI that way. We also used another bid platform called Deltec GovWin that tends to be more government contracts, but we thought we would reach out that way as well. So a couple of different ways to cast a wide net. And the initial period was 90 days for responses, and we didn't receive any responses. We had a couple verbal inquiries, so we extended that by a couple months. So we had it out there for a full 5 months. We ended up receiving 3 responses. As well, we received a couple of responses outside of the RFI process. So I'll walk you through those responses in a couple slides. This is just a visual of Tomato Springs North. This image is looking south along the 241. The toll plaza in the foreground there is fully closed to traffic. And then this is Catalina View on the State Route 73. The center of the view, you can see the through lanes, 3 lanes in each direction. And on the outside, you see the toll plazas. In this case, the toll plazas both have a single lane of traffic that is maintained that's where the truck lane passes through the toll plazas. So we intentionally wrote this RFI, kept it fairly concise. It was a 7-page document, and it contained a lot of detail in terms of making sure that proposers understood what the constraints are out there, the fact that we do have live traffic and we need to maintain live traffic, the fact that there's important safety considerations. So we didn't want to encourage them to make a proposal without fully understanding the constraints. We know that these constraints are quite restrictive, but we still we were hopeful to get some very innovative ideas through the process. So, and the underlying thought was that we want to look and explore innovative uses for the toll plazas that would benefit our drivers, but also local communities. So we did receive 3 proposals. The proposals ranged from very short and concise to one that was very detailed. And the proposals were reviewed by a number of staff from Caltrans and internal staff, and the results are as follows. Each of the concepts that were promoted or shared have merit, but each of the concepts that were shared also run into the same constraints that I'll walk you through in a few moments here. So The first proposal, this was the one that was very extensive. It was received from a national engineering firm, and they had a team of 7 consultants on the proposal. So they'd done very innovative work around the country and internationally. What you see there is an image of a potential mobility hub. And they actually had 4 ideas embedded in their proposal. This mobility hub or robo-taxi hub, the idea of providing a traffic management center for TCA, the idea of electric vehicle charging and clean freight fueling, and then the idea of using the toll plazas for a test bed for various technologies. They also shared that they had experience on their team getting, I think it was over $40 million in funding. One of the features of the RFI was we were asking proposers to identify funding sources, thinking this isn't something that we, TCA, would be able to fund, but we wanted them to come up with their own ideas for how they might fund it. The second idea came from a local, a team of 2. It was a developer and a contractor here from Southern California. They were promoting the idea of EV charge stations and a convenience store. The images you see here are samples that they gave us of work they'd done elsewhere. I'll note that these ideas were not implemented within state right-of-way, but near state right-of-way. So again, not actually on the system as ours would be, but certainly relevant experience. And then the third idea was the idea of putting up a coffee shop and bookstore. And this was the more concise 2-page proposal. This proposer did identify a number of potential funding sources, but really was just presenting a very high-level idea. So the process we followed is noted on this slide. We issued that RFI and tried to keep it broad to get ideas. And then we had a very detailed discussion with Caltrans and internally with what are the challenges, and Caltrans particularly identified some of the challenges that they saw. I've noted 3 of them here. One is that the California Vehicle Code and even some of the the federal codes limit what can be done for profit inside state right-of-way. When you see convenience stores and rest areas, gas stations on interstates on the East Coast, those tend to be items that were grandfathered in. Those were developed well before there was an interstate system in some cases. In our case here in California, the state is not allowed to have third parties operating on state right-of-way, and they're not allowed to have for-profit businesses operate at the toll plaza or at rest areas. So there's certain things that would have to change to address jurisdictional considerations. Secondly, there's design considerations. Caltrans maintains access control and other design standards that would have to be. What access control, what I mean by that is that on and off ramps generally connect to public right-of-way. They don't connect to a private right-of-way. So the idea of us potentially having Caltrans dispose of the land through an excess land process and then have on and off ramps to the toll plazas, very complicated because you can't have on and off ramps to a private parcel. So even just that process of disposing of a toll plaza through an excess land process, very complex as well. And then finally, Caltrans maintains safety on the system and has tort liability. So anything that happens in the state right-of-way, including these toll plazas, is really subject to their review and scrutiny regarding the potential safety considerations. Now, our current stage is to continue our coordination with Caltrans and respond to the folks that gave us these ideas. So that's where we're at. I did want to highlight that Caltrans has made some progress on some areas. And we coordinated with some of the folks from Caltrans headquarters as well as the district. This is an example of a charge station that has been implemented at a rest area on the I-5 Tejon Pass. There's, I believe, 9 locations like this in Central California. It's a great idea, but the challenge is that the state is not allowed to charge for the electricity. So the electricity is provided for free, and they maintain the facilities on their own, on state taxpayer dime as well. So it's not really a business model that's easy to propagate. And what they explained to me as well is that there's currently 15,000 charge points, charge stations in the state. 50 of them are on state right-of-way. But again, their hands are kind of tied right now as to what they can do and how they could propagate this model. They did mention that they've considered legislation in the past and are open to doing that going forward, because certainly In our state, 1 out of every 4 vehicles now that's sold is an electric vehicle. So there's going to be an increasing demand over time for this type of service. So that's why we want to continue the dialogue with Caltrans and possibly support them with ideas of ways to loosen or adjust the state requirements that would restrict activities such as EV charging. I'm going to shift to just a brief highlight of some of the other activities that we heard. You're already familiar with the Irvine PD motorcycle officer training that occurs at our toll plazas. Caltrans had also mentioned the potential of a future maintenance station on one of our toll facilities. They see a real advantage of having it right there as they currently maintain our facilities now, do all the maintenance. And then there's a real interest in potential fire suppression facilities. This image shows you Tomato Springs North and that Irvine PD motorcycle officer training activity that happens several times a year. Certainly a very innovative and beneficial, low-cost way of utilizing the toll plazas. And again, this location happens to be one of the locations that Caltrans would be interested in the future of developing a maintenance station. Many of you have heard and even suggested this idea of us installing water tanks, fire suppression tanks at toll plazas. So the images you see here are of a product called a helipod. And you can see the idea would be a helicopter hovers above that, gets water, and then is able to deploy the water on a fire. We met with OCFA twice and had multiple conversations with them about this. And they did express concern. They said that for safe operations of a helicopter, the toll plazas are just not wide enough. You can't get physically far enough away from live traffic. They also commented that a helicopter hovering creates a lot of dust and a lot of visual distraction. So again, it would have to be sufficient distance away from live traffic. Caltrans echoed those same concerns. So that really eliminated the idea of placing a helipod at a toll plaza. But we, continue the dialogue with OCFA, and they are currently finalizing a process to implement a pilot program. And what you see in this image is a pilot program for what's called fire retardant material. It would be housed in that white tank. The black structure with the yellow supports is a containment area around it, and there's a little generator there and a pump. And the idea is they want to deploy these, or are in the process of deploying some of these at key locations throughout the county to support wildfire ground crews. In talking with Scott Hatch, he mentioned that they have identified some locations that work for them currently. They're still open to putting one at one of our mitigation sites in the future if needed. And so just giving this as an example of our interest and ongoing partnership with OCFA, because it's certainly in all of our interest to work together to find ways to do fire suppression. So as I mentioned, this is information only. We've learned a lot from this process, and I think that there's going to be a continued dialogue. We are going to convert the spot on our website where we advertise the request for information to be a landing page in case others want to suggest ideas, because we want to keep the conversation going. We'll certainly continue our dialogue with Caltrans about what can be done to possibly expand opportunities in the future. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Spears. First speaker, Director Grant.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation, and as I've expressed in the past, also discussed very robustly with our Supervisor Foley and Alternate Annis. I'm very supportive of the fire prevention at Catalina View, and I'm very encouraged that you're being very nimble in shifting if we can't do the tank, the helipod, that we can maybe move into that fire retardant possibility. I realize that it's a longer timeline than just getting it, but I hope that we'll be very aggressive in pursuing that with the Fire Authority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the queue is Director Tello, alternate Tello.
I just had two observations. I like the idea of something being built there. I mean, it makes sense that a charging station would go there, or some sort of like a coffee shop. If there's the demand for that, and I would say that
Alternate Tayo, could you please turn on your speaker?
before they build anything, Oh, I'm sorry. Before McDonald's builds anything, they already know the demand of what is going to go, of that restaurant that they're going to put. I'm just wondering if you went that route, is there the demand for that? And then the second observation I had was that if I think there's examples of for-profit activities happening on state property. If you go to Huntington Beach, they've allowed concessionaires to go there, and they've had one concessionaire that's doing live music that really is doing really well. So I think there are examples of the possibility of something like this happening, and if there is the demand, would it behoove us to get special permission from the state to do it at this one location as a test?
Yeah, and thank you for those comments. And yes, I believe that there is an opportunity for us to continue the dialogue. Certainly, our goal was to reach out to a broad audience and hopefully capture those folks that may be interested in, like a McDonald's. But even if McDonald's themselves had applied through this process, they would have come to the same challenge.
Yeah, and I'm not saying McDonald's. Probably it would be Starbucks.
There you go. Absolutely. And I think that that's something that is still a conversation to be had. But currently and I will mention that when I said state property, I meant also Caltrans owned and operated facility. The vehicle code certainly applies there where it may not apply to state-owned property down at the beach. So, but I guess the point is that there is some jurisdictional challenges that still need to be overcome, and we are actively very interested in continuing the dialogue with our partners at Caltrans to see if there's opportunities.
CEO Chamberlain?
Thank you, Chair Penaloza. What I can tell you is we are exploring for the next round of our legislative platform, including some language that will allow staff more flexibility to consider legislative changes that might open up some more opportunity for the toll plaza reuse. Of course, we recognize Caltrans doesn't comment on future or current legislation, but we're certainly ready and willing to work with Caltrans and other partners to maximize the space that we have out there for other uses.
Thank you, CEO. Chair Kelly?
Yes, just to clarify, we had a comment about the fire retardant tanks, and we are only looking at potential mitigation sites, not the toll plaza for those, correct? Is that correct?
Yes, that was the conversation we had with OCFA, was they were asking, they have some specific locations in mind, so they asked us about Saddle Club and one of our other sites as were they potential, and we are certainly open to those, working through the challenges if they want to move forward with those locations. At this time, I think they've found, Scott mentioned to me, they've found some other locations that work for them, and it's a pilot, but so we want to keep the dialogue open with them.
Okay, and they're not interested in putting them on our toll plazas?
No, they didn't mention that as a location that they wanted to have them. I think there was a little concern about the potential for vandalism and that sort of thing, but that wasn't a key location for them.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
CEO Chamberlain?
Yeah, so I want to add a little bit more context. Your staff have made it very clear to OCFA that we are open and willing to work with them for fire suppression ideas, whether it's on or off our toll plazas. What Mr. Spears is talking about is OCFA has identified other locations that might meet their needs more specifically today, but they are well aware that we are open to engaging with them if they want to explore use of the toll plazas or mitigation sites going forward.
Thank you for that information, and thank you for the report. I wanted to personally comment that I laughed a little bit when I saw the option 2 a couple years ago. The pictures that are in slide 2 are from the Rove station in Santa Ana. It's the first in the nation that they were able to build. Great concept, EV charging stations and convenience store. And I remember a couple years ago, I mentioned it to staff, hey, we should have charging stations at these unused toll plazas. And so I'm happy that our consultant now said the same thing. But I love the concept of this personally. I think there is a desire, at least on my behalf as a board, to pursue any changes, legislative changes at the state level. I remember using a Central California charging station about a year ago, and I was shocked and excited to find out that they were free. And I looked at my wife, I was like, hey, it's free. And so now I understand why. I didn't know why that was the case, but I think that's something that we could definitely pursue as a board. I'd be supportive of that. And with that said, the different, I think this is, I don't want us to abandon this entirely, and I'm happy that we're not, from the comments I heard from the CEO. I think it's important that we continue to look at all of these options. I personally like option 2, and on number 3, I'm thinking of somebody, you know, driving on the toll roads and actually stopping to purchase a book, maybe. It just doesn't, I feel like it'd be charging would be the more useful detour of or stopping on the toll roads. So that would be my comments. Thank you for this. Thank you for this information. I hope that we continue to pursue this and don't leave any stone unturned when it comes to these things. There's definitely, there should be wiggle room on what we could do here. So with that, those are my comments, but I'll go to Director Pezzold and then followed by Director Connors.
Thank you. When I'm on the toll road, I notice naturally that there are a number of trucks that use it as a truck stop. And I think there's a lack in Orange County for truck stops, rest areas for truck drivers. And you can't help but notice they're resting. And I'm wondering if there's some way of making that a possibility, maybe in the, maybe temporarily, just making it somewhat official or doing something, because from what I understand, one of the reasons why they go there is because there's a lack and there's a necessity for drivers to have some sort of rest area. And it's kind of parked away and people don't see it, but that's one thing I picked up and I noticed, and it's heavily used for that. So anyway.
Thank you for the comment. That is something we can follow up with Caltrans and have future consideration.
Director Connors?
Just for our reference, can you give us the approximate dimensions of the, not the individual toll plazas, but just the kind of space we're talking about?
Yes, they're about a half a mile in length, so the Catalina View Toll Plaza is about a half a mile from where it departs to where it rejoins. And I'd say about 150 feet wide. The pavement's about 100 feet wide at its widest point.
Thank you for that, Director Connors. Are there any other directors wanting to, Director Chafee?
Yes, thank you. It looks like an opportunity for the ultimate drive-through here. The configuration, I think, is important because it's not just the plaza itself, but the land leading up to it. So I'm curious about that. And I would encourage multiple uses. If we can figure out how to put a water tank on there, and I maybe some way expanding the land a little bit to do that, it could also have other uses at the same time. So I would like to suggest that we look at multiple uses and get a better sense of what the land actually is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Chafee. Thank you for the presentation, Director Spears. That was very helpful and informative. I will now, Madam Clerk, are there any public comments been received?
No, there have been no additional public comments.
Thank you. With that, we will now go to our CEO report.
Thank you.
CEO Chamberlain.
Thank you, Chair Penaloza. An update on the 241-91 Express Connector project. On October 1st, we had our public hearing that's required for any toll applicant going through the AB 194 process through the California Transportation Commission. The public hearing is a requirement for any agency that is requesting toll authority via AB 194 through the CTC. TCA had an overwhelming project support, not only from our regional transportation partners, OCTA and RCTC, but also strong support from Caltrans. There were a lot of support letters sent in and comments from the public, local, state, and federal elected officials, business and government organizations, local chambers of commerce, and labor representatives that were there at the public hearing. CTC commissioners were on hand to hear the project overview, benefits of the project, operating details like progressive demand management, and support from our partner agencies, which is required for an action through the CTC. The next step in the process is to have our application for supplemental toll authority agendized at an upcoming California Transportation Commission meeting. We presume this will be in December. While we were shooting for an October CTC meeting, as most of you know, CTC staff felt additional time to finalize their review of our application was needed. So our agenda item was pushed out to December. I continue to extend my gratitude to the Foothills Eastern Board, TCA staff, and our partner agencies for their collaboration, time, and support in moving this much-needed project forward. I'd also like to thank our board leadership who attended the public hearing, Chair Kelly and Director Lim, as well as TCA staff who coordinated with the CTC on logistics for planning the event. It truly was a fantastic event where there was no opposition presented. I think that's a first for 194 requests through the CTC. Moving on, it was good to see many of you at the annual Mobility 21 Southern California Transportation Summit in Anaheim last month. I had the privilege of representing TCA on a panel titled Tolling in Southern California, Partnerships, Innovation, and Opportunity for the Future. The discussions center around tolling projects and their performance, effectiveness, future opportunities for tolling, partnerships, of course, as well as benefits to the overall transportation system. In addition, TCA had a very active booth that showcased the 24191 Express Connector, and those that had an opportunity to walk by probably saw that booth very crowded with constituents walking by, making comments like, is this really going to happen? And it's about time. So I would say we're one of the more popular booths at the Mobility 21 Summit. So thank you to staff for organizing that as well. Earlier this week, I joined Chief Toll Operations Officer Vinny Valdez at the IBTTA Annual Conference in Denver, which brings together transportation leaders from around the globe to discuss key industry-related topics. Breakout sessions this year focused on global trends specifically related to artificial intelligence, cybersecurity threats, partnerships, and innovations in tolling. Chief Toll Operations Officer Valdez did an amazing job coordinating and facilitating an international panel on tolling interoperability, where we learned from those who are not only nationally interoperable, but internationally interoperable in parts of Europe. Vinny's work on the panel certainly reflected well on TCA and our efforts to engage in the interoperability space across the nation. So a big thank you to Vinny for his contribution at IBTTA. Last and certainly not least, yesterday, the Capital Area Regional Toll Authority, CARTA, many of you have heard me say that acronym before, voted unanimously to select TCA as their preferred back office and customer service partner and direct their staff to engage in cost negotiations and contract development with TCA. TCA staff are very happy to continue to explore this partnership with CARTA, which is consistent with your board-adopted strategic plan. Similar to how we progressed with SBCTA, staff will bring any agreements on back office partnerships through the Joint Toll Operations Committee and the boards for consideration as things progress. So about a year and a half worth of business development work on behalf of all of you TCA staff. I want to thank them for their engagement and leadership on this partnership as well. That concludes my comments, Chair.
Thank you, CE Chamberlain. Chair Kelly, do you have anything to report?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the public hearing with the CTC. I did attend that, and I can tell you we can be very, very proud of our CEO and of our Stephanie Blanco. They made wonderful presentations, just very, very professional, very polished, very complete, and very compelling. So they did a really good job. I'm surprised that the issue has not been formally accepted yet by the CTC, but we look forward to hearing that in December. Also, I wanted to compliment our CEO on his presentations at Mobility 21. I did sit in on that, a few of us did, and he does really well. He makes us all look good, and he looks good, does a really good job. And finally, this approval by, or this selection by CARTA it's a pretty big deal. The fact that they're looking at us as for the back office partner, and this doesn't happen by accident either. This is the result of hard work by our staff and the fact that we do the job well. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. And I have no comments aside, but just concurring with Chair Kelly. Thank you, CEO Chamberlain, for doing a great job at Mobility 21 and for the last couple years that we've had you here at the helm. Thank you so much. Next, we will transition into the closed session, which will be held in the committee conference room. Mr. Rubin, can you take the full board into closed session, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you. We're going to have a joint closed session conference with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation under subdivision A and D2 of Government Code Section 54956.9, significant exposure to litigation, and I do anticipate reportable action afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ben Rubin, are there any items to report out of after closed session?
We do have reportable action after the closed session, Chair. The report is that the CEO has been authorized to enter into one or more written agreements at CEO's discretion, extending the time period to act on the claim, as well as if, at the time of the last day of that extension period, if it remains outstanding, the claim will be deemed denied.
Thank you for that, Ben. Now I will move to adjournment. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the San Joaquin Hills Transportation Corridor Agency Board of Directors and the Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor Agency Board of Directors will be held on Thursday, November 13th, 2025 at 9:30 a.m. at TCA offices, 125 Pacifica, Irvine, California. This meeting is now adjourned.